Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Steve Rhodes and BaanTu. I'm joined by my co-host off-screen, Jenny V.
Hello, everyone.
And actually I have an original Jenny V mug from last year's High Desert Human Design Conference. Different strokes for different folks with a stylized body graph. So I have this visual aid, which is going to look a little bit like Charlie from Sunny in Philadelphia for for people who are new to this. But basically, this was some of the notes. This is what my notes look like, ladies and gentlemen. This is like, if there's any good handwriting on there, that's Jenny's.
You should move it over. Yep, right. Bring it down. And bring it closer to me now. There you go. There we go.
Yeah, so, if you've seen Sunny in Philadelphia, this is when Charlie tries to explain, the conspiracy behind... But no, this is the foundation of Steve Rhodes' system. And I know Jenny has a couple questions, but I thought I might do a little overview first, if that's okay. If you and I have two approaches. So the first approach is basically what I'm showing in this graphic, which in a convoluted way just has the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these are the fundamental tones, these are the colors, these are the lines, and these are the basics of the formula that repeats itself, but in different ways, in completely different ways at the level of tone compared to color. I mean, it's so fascinating what you can do with 6. Let's just start with 6 lines. This is the hexagram of the I Ching. So this is my first approach, by the way, to Steve Rhodes. My other approach, I'll mention in a minute. I have a second approach, which is kind of more fun even, but we'll do the more technical one first. Basically, what Steve Rhodes has done, and I think more people in human design would actually get into Steve Rhodes' work. They would actually be more into BaanTu if they understood this. But what he's done is he's just analyzed the 6 lines, the 6 colors, and the 6 tones in terms of their diagrams, not their trigrams. You have 2 trigrams or you have 3 diagrams. This is nothing new. It's just new in human design, and it's only really new at the level of line and color, although Steve Rhodes is contributing some new things at the level of tone as well. In tone, it's very common in human design to say ajna binary, splenic binary, solar plexus binary. So the first way of approaching his work, and I really think more people in human design would be into Steve Rhodes' work if he made it more accessible. Now, I had a YouTube comment last time saying, don't confuse human design and BaanTu, they're totally different. No, they are not. That is flat out wrong. They are identical systems. This is simply Steve Rhodes has created his own words for certain groupings within the system and his own interpretations and his own keynotes. But they're not, I wouldn't even say not substantially different. I would say they are not only isomorphic, they are homeomorphic. That means they are identical. They are identical systems. He's using identical calculations across the board with his own interpretations. So here's the first thing to realize. Steve Rhodes can claim all he wants that his system is different. People can claim in my YouTube comments all they want. Hey, Jonah, don't confuse Steve Rhodes' system, BaanTu, with human design. They're different. No, they are not. They are identical systems. What Steve Rhodes has done is he has created new words, circle, hexagon, and triangle, to refer to groupings of line, color, and tone, respectively. And he doesn't say this in his book anywhere. And he doesn't explain it on his websites anywhere. He doesn't have this information anywhere out there. And so you kind of just have to deconstruct it and figure it out yourself.
Yeah, like basically you need to know human design and then look at it. If you just look at BaanTu first, yeah, he offers no real...
Well, you have to know human design to figure it out, but what he's hoping is you don't have to know human design at all because he's kind of created a simplified version of it with BaanTu. However, this is why I'm always asking, who is Steve Rhodes' audience? Because I'm his perfect audience, but he's not writing to me. I'm his perfect audience because I'm somebody who's 7 years in the human design experiment, who's gone very deep with it, who has a tremendous database to cross-reference and a tremendous amount of research and knowledge and a tremendous amount and so on. And so I'm the perfect person to compare notes with. So when he's describing people with tone 5 and 6, and he has a few pages writing about what these people are like, well, it's nice to compare notes with what other people think those kinds of people are like as well. In fact, that's why I'm so interested in his work. I'm not being overly critical in that sense. It's just funny because he's writing it for mainstream masses, and he's not writing it for the people that actually would benefit. It's the same thing I tell a lot of people about the mutative lines and how celebrities are actually outside of the inner cores of human design. Like people like Ra, even though he wasn't famous, he knew a lot of celebrities, but they were the less mutative ones. They were the ones who were mutants, but were still far enough down the fractal line that they were selling their mutative genius to the masses, right? As opposed, like, a good example is I was in a college class with Stephanie Germanota. We took a class together at the New Center for Research and Practice, and she's really into Jung. People know her better as Lady Gaga. Well, it's interesting, before Human Design, I thought that I was so lucky to have been in a class with her, and now I kind of feel like she was lucky to have been in a class with me, because she is just as mutative, but is slightly farther away in the fractal line where she's still pointed towards the masses. She's not pointed towards the other mutants, right? I'm pointed towards the other mutants. I give creative people pep talks about, especially the ones that are so bitter and jaded about how is Drake number one and how is, Ed Sheeran and whatever, Bobby this and Billy that, the musicians that people don't like, Taylor Swift or, and for me, I'm like, that's great. Those musicians are mega stars. The people that are angry and bitter and jaded about them are mutants who are still not yet mutative enough, who need to hold themselves accountable to turning away from the masses. I get in conversations with people all the time where they're talking about, how do I explain human design to people so they'll get it? You don't. You stop trying because you yourself have to go further to be able to leave those people behind. And that's something people don't want to hear. So I think Steve Rhodes is in that same boat where he's writing for the masses with some sort of fantasy of changing the world and being famous and being adored by tens of thousands of people. And when you really get to what human design is saying, it's saying you're not for the tens of thousands. I mean, well, we are. We're for the 20 million. But we're for the 20 million mutants, or 18 million, I think it is now. We had 8 billion people in the world as a recent record. 8 billion, woohoo, yay, we're a parasite with shoes, as Bill Hicks likes to say. We had 8 billion people in the world, and according to human design, it's the 4% of 4%, so what is that, around 20 million people, that are actually capable of getting human design, that are actually part of the mutative fractal line. According to human design, there is a clique, there is an avant-garde, and it is around 20 million people right now. And in the times of ancient Rome, it was around 20,000 people, right? But that's just how the population explosion has gone. Or maybe it was around 2,000 people in ancient Rome. I haven't quite done the orders of magnitude yet on that. I don't know the world population then. Maybe an astute open head in the comments can post the world population at 0 AD and what 4% of 4% would be. But in any case, Steve Rhodes is still very much pointed towards the masses, not at the 4% of 4%. He's pointed at the 99%, And it's something you start to realize when you see the fractal lines and you kind of see how mutation works and you see who you are for. And a lot of us are actually for far fewer people than we might imagine. And even people who really are for the masses are often not how we imagine, because we often imagine them as more mutative and more cutting edge and more avant-garde than we are, when actually the opposite is true. Beyonce and Jay-Z moved to Santa Fe. I heard about it. Jenny heard about it. We heard about it, weeks before it hit TMZ, because our friend I actually met the guy who sold the house. I met the guy who is the realtor and manages the estate of Tom Ford, and we talked for hours. Now, am I lucky to have been in the presence of such wealth and fame? Or are they this close to actually reaching the mutative core that they were searching for, before they decided to sell their mutativeness to the masses, because they just got turned around? They just got turned around facing the masses instead of facing each other, which by each other, I mean the other mutant freaks out there, right? So if you look at the mutative core, it's very small, and it really is us versus them. And everyone who loves to idolize the masses and idolize the mob, you're not going to be idolizing the mob when they have pitchforks, okay? I'm a fifth line, and I've had enough past lives where the kind of information I'm putting on YouTube right now would get me killed, you know what I mean? So we don't need to idolize the masses. There's a real anti-elitism in a lot of people who come to human design who say, well, how can human design be so elitist as to make these preposterous claims, blah, blah, blah. That's the not-self in a nutshell. It is populist, because populist is homogenized, is lowest common denominator, is the masses, is the program, okay? And I'm sorry, but, I mean, Nietzsche got this so clearly, and Jung and all these people have understood. I mean, it's hierarchies all the way down. And the fractal line hierarchy is that the whole world can't be mutating all at once, okay? It can't always be changing. And every life, every reincarnation, you are in the exact same position. Yeah. Right, and we are back. A little technical difficulty. So, you know, all this is a long-winded way of saying that Steve Rhodes is doing incredible work. It's interesting the way he has marketed his book and directed his book toward the masses. Because he's obviously a very mutative person. And when you're a mutative person, every incarnation you end up meeting the same forces, which are also mutative people. And it's not saying that it's bad to not be mutative. It's simply saying that, statistically speaking, only so many of the crystals of consciousness can have had front row seats, so to speak, for the Big Bang. And only so many can have second row seats. And only so many can have third row seats, and fourth, and fifth, and sixth row seats. And if you had those front row seats, you tend to all find each other. And there might be people, I mean, when Ra talks about fractal lines, he talks about people that are next door to you, where you can just look at them and they know immediately what you're thinking, compared to people who are down the block or miles away, so to speak, who are actually hundreds or thousands of places away from you. And they would just look at you like you're crazy. There's no communication occurring farther away in the fractal lines, right? That's what's interesting, is that communication really does occur in ellipsis, meaning it occurs in the ... And if you understand what somebody means, the perfect communication is silence, really, right? You know, Alok said to me, he said, words are very limited in communicating. And we always say, let the aura do the talking. And there's so much more that communicates. And when you're in a fractal line family with people, at any given moment in time, whether it was Leonardo da Vinci discovering ornithology and inventing the ornithopter, you know, the first helicopter, the first submarine, or Galileo, or whether it's people throughout history, and the non-Western canon as well, there are mutative hubs everywhere. I mean, whether we're talking about Mount Ascona, Mount Verite in Ascona, Switzerland, that's a real mutative hub, or the Dada artists, or even, I'm always reading about these communes and intentional communities and kind of places. Oh, I was reading about the kitchen in New York. What a mutative hub. The Talking Heads came out of that. And the founders of the kitchen, the Vasulkas, moved to Santa Fe and helped found another mutative hub, Currents New Media, which has just been going on. And you see how throughout history there are, at any given point, there are a few places where all the mutants come together, where they're all attracted, and then they can all speak to each other in ellipses. They all kind of have the same shared vocabulary, same shared language, same shared understanding. This is your fractal family. But very much like the Gnostic theory of panspermia, where we're kind of scattered into the universe, basically each of us is thrown. It's very much this theme of thrownness, kind of like Heidegger's thrownness. For the Gnostics, you're thrown into the world, into matter, as spirit, and you have what they call the pneuma, which is a little tiny essence of God, of the Godhead in you. It's that tiny microscopic, well, it's the personality crystal, right? And this pneuma is, you're kind of striving back towards God, but there's the demiurge who calls themselves God, who's pretending to be God, who everyone's worshiping as God. This is the Gnostic worldview. And that to get to the real God, you have to get past the demiurge, which is the kind of fake God, and so on. And so we're basically in this kind of place where we're blocked away from God, but we have to realize it. Now, I mention this only to say it's the same kind of theme of the fractal lines, of the fractal family. We're all thrown into the world. We're thrown into our family of birth. And it's like Deleuze says, we're moving from a filial society, that is family, filial, filiation means family, to an afilial society, non-filial or affilial, where we get the word affiliated, your affiliates, your affiliations, the people you are affiliated with, your non-family family. And that's the crystal family, right? That's the personality crystal family, we could call it, or the fractal family that you belong to, your particular people in your fractal line. So just like the Gnostics had this myth where we're all thrown into the world in different places and have to kind of claw our way back to God, human design has this idea where we're sort of thrown into the world and have to find our way back to our appropriate place. Especially hard for the undefined G, by the way. They only get there through the development of the wisdom and discernment of the undefined G center. Whereas the defined G has something in them that's going, not here, not here. There's no God here. There's no spirit here. There's no love here. There's no passion here. And they just keep, the defined G are the ones who leave their family of origin and set out and find their place. The undefined G are the ones who are taken there, who are picked. And someone says, you have what it takes to be one of us. So one of my favorites, the old film where the train rolls into town, I can't remember the name, but there's just a young woman who's never been on a train before, never hardly seen a train before, never left the town before. And she's looking at the train, and the guy in the train says, what are you doing out there looking in? Hop on in, look out. And that's the defined G. He's the defined G and she's the undefined. And he's saying, I'll take you somewhere more interesting, where there's more spirit, where there's more excitement, where there's more passion, where there's more love of life, not this loveless town, That's the defined G, right? So.
Well, I have a good question for you.
Please.
And based off what we were just talking about this concept of God, what do you think Steve Rhodes means by the title, The God Code, We Are Robots?
The God Code, we are robots, exclamation point. I mean, how often do you see an exclamation point in a title? I mean, I kind of love it. I kind of hate it. Again, it's like, who's his audience? Like, it's very funny. Isn't there already a book called The God Code?
Yeah.
This is in Steve Rhodes' terminology, this might be high resilience, because he has high resilience mind, and I wonder if this is just sort of over resilience of just kind of being like, oh, they use the name? Well, they don't own that name, even though they kind of do, but I wonder if that's like the over optimism in his terminology of his sixth color, innocence. Something really interesting Steve Rhodes contributes to the understanding of human design being that guilt and innocence as motivations are optimistic and are highly resilient. An interesting observation.
So there was a God Code. It was written by Greg Braden, and it's The Secret of Our Past and the Promise of Our Future.
Well, I like Steve Rhodes' subtitle better. I like We Are Robots better, because also, how often do you see God and robots together? It's very cyberpunk. It's very... Okay, quick analysis of Steve Rhodes. He's an INFJ, for sure. I was kind of on the fence, is he an INTJ? He reminds me of Cillian Murphy. Now, I've never seen videos of him. I've never heard him speak. But I can imagine how he talks. I could be totally wrong. I've only seen photos. But I was on the fence whether he's an INTJ, lead sleep, like myself and like Cillian Murphy, or if he's an INFJ. I'm still a little bit, but I think he's an INFJ. And, for those into personality typology, a lot of people type as INFJ and so on, but I think he's a real one, and he has some certain telltale qualities, and he's all about knowing. He alone knows, and he's a control freak about that knowledge and about how it's described and how it's expressed and how it's spoken. And I'm an introverted intuitive also, so I'm also a control freak in this way. However, part of my grand thesis of the integration of Jungian typology with human design is that for IJs, they become less controlling when they live their design, right? So they can kind of ease up on their control freak nature and they can allow things to be chaotic. So their big learning is, I don't have to be in charge of everything. It's just going to happen without me. Mm-hmm. It's like the guy from the Baltimore Sun, or I forget what newspaper it was, where he said he was the editor and he hadn't taken a vacation in 25 years. You know this one, right? And he said the reason, they asked him why had he not taken a vacation. He said, well, I have two great fears. The first is that everything will fall apart. And the second is that it won't. And it's that desire to be needed and that needing to be needed.
Absolutely. But I would also say, you're talking about the different types, but, using his own language, you're a person who values respect, and he's a person who values feeling good. So I feel, right?
Right, he's a double feeling, isn't he?
Yeah, so
in
I
his terminology.
think, the farther you go onto the solar plexus side, that's where you have innocence too. It's like, well, let's just call it by a different name. And you have respect, where it's like, no, respect the source. Respect
That's a really good point. So, for those who don't know Steve Rhodes' system, he divides everything, and this again takes it back to how it all begins, which is the division of 6. He divides it into diagrams, into 2s, and the 2s are success, respect, feeling. That's at the level of tone. So when you have the 2 at the level of tone, the 1 and the 2 are the 2 forms of success, active and passive or something, who knows, we could say. And then the 3 and the 4 are the 2 forms of respect. And the 5 and the 6 are the 2 forms of feeling. And feeling, it's interesting because in human design we say the spleen is the source of feel good, and yet the way I always understood feel good is kind of like safety and security and like that feeling of being hugged and held. Like a baby being held and it stops crying. That is feel good. But that's very different than, although he describes it also saying they want to feel good. The feeling people, the tone 5 and 6. So if you're tone 1 and 2, this is success. And you can have it on the personality or the design side. This is your sun and earth. So Jenny and myself are both tone 2 on the design side. And we've been talking a lot about that. I mean, it's been really nice. Since our trip to LA, we've had really just a lot of conversations about the binaries. And I do think, and again, it's so funny because we are beneficiaries of Steve Rhodes' work, but he didn't really direct it towards us. But really, in the big picture, it's for us. Because we're the ones who are going to be able to translate that back into human design and to be able to have an intelligent conversation and help it actually unlock a deeper understanding of the things we've already been tracking and already been observing.
It lines up.
Yeah, it does line up. And it's great original research. I just want to say, sorry, Steve, that the people you're writing it for who have never heard of human design, who are not in the experiment at all, who are just going to make a website and have you kind of tell them some things, they are not the beneficiaries of this. It is not really for them. You might be writing it to them, and you might be thinking that that is your target audience and thinking that that's what's going to make you famous and go down in history, but it's actually people like me and Jenny who are getting the most out of your work. I know this because we are at the core of a real mutative core of human design people, and none of them are talking about your work, Steve. So, because it's not really written for them, but it is written for them. You see what I'm saying? You don't mean to write it for them. It's written for them, it's just they don't know it and you don't know it, okay? And the people you think it's written for, it was never for in the first place. So, just want to clear that up there a little bit. Sorry, I get on my soapbox a little bit.
I'm not sure who it was for.
It's for us.
Well, no, I mean, within the masses.
Who
finds it?
Well, that's the interesting thing is, maybe... And in some sense, I do get it, because Steve Rhodes is talking about 2 things that we do not really talk about in human design. Resilience, aka trauma, and the ability to overcome trauma, and how easy or difficult it is for you to overcome trauma. And mood and happiness, and what'll make you happy. And if you asked Ra what would make you happy, he'd probably say, this job should come with a gun. That was one of his favorite jokes. Was, can I just have a samurai sword and just plop off people's heads and say better luck next life? That's what he wanted to do. So it's very different in that way. And we're not even gonna, we saw this here, we're not even gonna talk about this book. But okay.
For another day.
So, okay, I do want to bring it back, though, because I said in the beginning there are 2 approaches, and I'd love to hear your more questions as well, but there are 2 approaches to Steve Rhodes that I kind of immediately saw, to BaanTu. And if you haven't already, go to BaanTu.com, it's BaanTu.com, and make your chart, because it is pretty fun. But the first approach is this one. So this is the approach where we're literally just...
Just like a better drawing.
It's okay, though, because I think this is a good indication of how, I guess this is actually a perfect, iconic representation of the first approach, is the technical approach, right? The purely technical approach. And the technical approach is to start asking yourself what the 1 and 2 have in common, what the 3 and 4, what the 5 and 6. And so I'm going to go through that really quick, and then we get to the second one. So when you're doing the first approach, you're really learning, and that's kind of how we started. We've started.
This was my question, by the way.
Oh, please. Okay, well, ask it.
This was you're answering my question without me.
Well, but why don't you ask it so I can make sure I'm on the
Okay,
right?
I said, is there a significance to the relationship of the number and the binary? For example, 1 being in the splenic binary. Like 1.
Oh, you mean in his system?
Yeah, like just in the binaries, like because you're going to explain it, like.
Well, yeah. So what he calls 1, 2, and 3 are actually, for us, we just expand each one all the way to 6, right? So, and there is absolute significance. In fact, I guess this is the first approach, is to really deeply understand the tonal architecture from a human design perspective that goes into what he at a high level calls success, respect, feeling. So it's fun because he just gives you these very simple words. And it actually is really cool because you can go through a large number of individuals. So something I really like that he's done is he's looked at 2,000 people. It's kind of like there's these different paths. Like Richard Rudd is all about let's contemplate this stuff, write a bunch of poems about it. Okay. Steve Rhodes is like, let's find only extremely precise birth times and let's look at people and categorize them in these very high level ways as success, success, respect, respect, success, respect, feeling, 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 success, you know what I mean? And start looking for patterns and going, what do all the feeling people have in common? What do all the feeling success people have in common? And that's what he's done. And he's taken very precise birth times because you need a very precise birth time for this to work. So that is kind of the very technical approach to it. Now that's the one that I'm going forward with, of course, and that's what we've been doing. And and you're saying, well, this is so. I wish we had a better graphic for it. Sure, but at the same time, it is very complicated, and the only thing you can really do is understand. And logical understanding comes from learning and drawing it out yourself and thinking about it and seeing how it all connects yourself and making, So you can't really give anyone understanding. We can just kind of talk about it and say, here's the formula. If you want to play with the formula, you can play with it. And so his formula is anywhere you have tones 1 and 2, you have success. Anywhere you have tones 3 and 4, you have respect. Anywhere you have tones 5 and 6, you have feeling. And these are the key mood setters and what makes you happy and what really you're looking for in life and what really makes you feel fulfilled and happy and content and in a good mood. And when you're not getting those things, and they're on the body or the mind side, he really simplifies personality design, mind, body. And so if you have respect on the body side, you really want to be respected for dressing well and for being in shape. I have success on the body side. I don't care about that, but I have respect on the mind side. I want to be respected for being smart and having cool opinions and whatever, interesting ideas. Even though I don't have the gate of opinions, I do have the gate of ideas. But you know what I mean. It's because it's ajna. It's the binary. It's what that binary wants. The splenic binary is all about success. It doesn't care if you respect it or not. The ajna binary, Rhodes tells us, is all about respect. It doesn't care if it wins. It's not competitive in that way. And the solar plexus binary is all about feeling, which again, as I was saying, is kind of funny because he just says they want to feel good, which is usually you would think splenic, but it's like, no, they want emotionally satisfying experiences and they want things that have a good vibe, that have a good emotional energy to them, that are positive and uplifting and so on, and not having to defer enjoyment to a continual later date. Okay, so that's the first approach, and I think we should go back to that in a moment. Now, the second one I just want to mention because I just kind of realized this is it's actually kind of genius and it's kind of fun. And I almost think this is probably the more popular side of the business, and it goes to show you popularity is not a good indicator of how suited a tool is or how good something is or any of this, right? Because the second approach is Steve Rhodes calls himself the relationship wizard. And what he tells you is actually kind of what everybody wants to know coming from astrology, but they have to kind of give up to get into human design. But he says, no, I'll tell you this. Do you want to know what it is?
What is it?
It's basically what all those co-star, the pattern, all this, it's what, your destiny cards, love cards, cards of destiny, all of these things. It's how suited you are together with other people, right? your match, your compatibility, your star rating. He gives you a star rating. And in fact, Jenny and I haven't seen our star rating yet in his system. Maybe we'll do a live unveiling of it'll be like a reality show. We'll do a live unveiling of our star rating on a live stream. But he gives you a star rating from 0 to 5 stars. So this is the other approach. See, the first one is really coming from human design, kind of how we approached it, Jenny and myself, which is very much technically, with a technical understanding of tone. The second is, hey, you can put yourself in, you can put somebody else in, you can see what your stars are. And astrology is all about this, believe me. People in astrology, I've been to like astrology conferences, NORWAC, UAC, they always are like, the esprit, like the esteem of being an astrologer, we're so scholarly, and then at the end of it, they're always like, oh, but did you know that I had she has like she has Mars and Leo, like trining or whatever, I remember, it always comes down to that. Like, I remember I stayed in Chicago in a room with some other people, which was really hard for me because I was in the human design experiment, so I was trying to sleep as far away from everybody as possible. But I was staying in there, and I have Mars and Venus both conjunct in Leo, around 28 degrees Leo. And I remember there were women, and they were like, well, I have double Mars. I can't be, we had to share a bed at one point or something. It's like, well, I can't be in the same bed. Well, no, hey, I have Sagittarius. I mean, she's like, I have double Aries. I'm like, well, I have Aries and Sagittarius. It's not any better. We're always going to be it's going to be. But I'm just saying that all astrology is ultimately can be boiled down to this kind of are we compatible? Ooh, what's our compatibility? Well, we have Saturn. Well, that's hard. Well, we have Pluto. Oh, well, my Mars is trining your Venus, And it can all kind of boil down to that. And then you get into human design, and you have to leave that behind to a degree. Because when you learn about partnership analysis in human design, you really learn about respect. You learn about making decisions as yourself and not using checklists and not using star rating systems and not using, you know what I mean? You have to learn how to kind of leave behind the fantasy that something else can tell you who's correct for you. But in Steve Rhodes' defense, he says, refer to my other book, The Prophecy of Ra-Uru-Hu, to understand how love works, and that love is a matter of fractals. Yay, back to fractal lines. That true love is the gravitational pull of the magnetic monopole that draws the correct people into your life, or that draws you to them, so that you can find your fractal family. We've all had these past lives together. We haven't yet met each other this life. We're looking for each other. We're trying to find each other. If we have undefined G, we need to wisen up and become wise about who can take us to our fractal family. Like, the undefined G rule is, if someone takes you somewhere, if a defined G takes you somewhere and you don't like it, then that person's not your guide in this life. And you meet the right people in the right place. Right? This is a law of the undefined G. Right people in the right place, and the right people take you to the right place. You have to become wise about that. You have undefined solar plexus, and you don't want to tell somebody, I'm not your friend anymore, because you're attached to them, or you have undefined spleen, and you're holding on tight to them, or something like that, because they make you feel good in that way, safe and secure. Just let go, or just confront them, or do whatever it is you have to do. Because as an undefined G, that is how you find the people and places you love. You don't really find them, they find you, and they say, hop on in, and they take you there. But in any case, it's so important for the G Center and for all of us, we're here to find love. Compatibility is a different matter entirely. It's like my joke about split definition in human design. I say, all of us are designed for relationships. Some of us are also equipped for them. The split definition also happened to be equipped for them. I'm single deaf, Jenny's single deaf. We're designed for a relationship. We just have to make do with the wisdom we gain from life experience, because we don't have the built-in equipment to compromise as split definition people do. We're not willing to just compromise immediately and so on. So yeah, that's how I look at it. It's like my joke about we're all designed for relationships. Some of us are also equipped for it. When it comes to when it comes to relationships, we love who we love. Sometimes it can also be compatible. You know what I mean? you're with the person. If you really are making decisions as yourself, then you will get closer and closer and closer to your fractal family to find your true fractal and to find your true people. It actually is a very beautiful, very romantic, very poetic, almost like the Gnostic worldview of like striving to find God against the demiurge. But in this case, it's like striving against the random chaos of the world to find your true love, or to find your true family, to find your true allies, to find your team, your people. It's like an RPG where if you're playing Final Fantasy, you go across the land, or Dragon Quest, and everywhere you go, you pick up another person in your team, and you kind of build this team together, this hodgepodge team. That is very much the fractal family, and that is what the magnetic monopole is here to do. That's what Defined G like myself, are here to do, is to never rest until we found all of them and saved them from their boring lives, and brought them into the more interesting life that they're supposed to be living. And the undefined G's are here to be able to decondition enough and become wise enough to not be so heavily tied to those other tethered, trapped in the defined G of the person, of somebody else, right? Who's not taking them to their people. So again, if you have undefined G, the people in place rule. The right people take you to the right place. So think about places where you're really comfortable. Think about the people you've met there. Think about the people who've taken you there. Those are the correct people for you. And this is how you develop the wisdom, is by learning and noticing, oh, wow, I feel great around all these people, but that's because as a chemical cocktail, I have undefined spleen and they're just making me feel good. But actually, they're taking me to places where really bad things happen and I'm not meeting anybody cool there. And actually, this other person is taking me to places that I love and I feel amazing and I'm really supposed to be there. And the people that I meet there, the last person I met there gave me my favorite job. And so you start to kind of notice as an undefined G and go, oh my God, I've been sleepwalking through life because I've been so busy making decisions with my mind. My mind hasn't even noticed, hasn't even stopped to ask whether I really like this person or not. Hasn't even stopped to ask whether I actually am benefiting from going here, or whether I'm getting, you see undefined G people who are so cluttered with the detritus of inappropriate people because they're kind of just lost in the world, and there's somebody that's like a fractal, not even a fractal cousin, they're like a fractal, like across the water, like a different language, and you see them together and they're married, and you're like, how did this person marry this other person when they can't communicate at all? And it's like, what? Huh? Did you say something? No? Like there's zero communication between them. Now, thankfully that doesn't happen very often, and also in my fractal circles, I'm always, like Martin Krasinger said, he said people read the Wei Yi Ching and they get really depressed about it, or not, he didn't use the word depressed, but they read it and they think, wow, this sounds so intense. And as Martin Krasinger said, he goes, I don't know anyone, you read a really heavy line like self-destruction or Blaze of Glory, 28:6, and he says, the people that I know are not actually going out in a blaze of glory. They're actually very happy and very healthy people. So it does depend on your fractal lines. And so I should say that as well. Like my example of like some imaginary couple you see these people, but typically you see them at like the Target or the Walmart or something. You know what I mean? Like it's not, like I'm lucky enough that the people that I'm continually comforted and surprised by the fact that the people that come into my fractal line, my fractal family. There's a great quote from Ra, and you can take it a couple ways. And he said, I am continually humbled by those that I meet on my fractal line. And he's almost like humbled that I can meet such amazing people, and also humbled that these are the people I'm here to serve in some sense. You know what I mean? If you found me and if you get me, then I am here to serve you in some way, whether or not I even like you as a person, because your fractal family goes beyond that. It's kind of just like you're just in this kind of world together. And people talk about going into different worlds, and they say like, oh, I moved to LA and I got into the acting world, and then like pretty soon I knew everybody, and like it becomes a small world. That's what I mean by fractal. When you're in that world, everyone knows everyone. And when you're in the world within the world of the real decision makers in that world, the people that could fit in a small room are basically, kind of not running the show per se, but at least they all know each other and they're all the same players. And this is not conspiracy, this is just how the world works. It's always so funny. Conspiracy theorists get so freaked out by this. They're always like, some secret society is right, and like, we are the secret society. It's that, there's a great Robert Anton Wilson quote. He said, I like to think that the world is run by a small group of hyper-intelligent, nearly omnipotent beings, myself and my friends. So, people get so conspiratorial, and yet with human design, we learn that actually the fractal lines, like, yes, it's true that there's going to be insiders, there's going to be outsiders. The outsiders are the conspiracy theorists making up all the stories about what goes on inside. The insiders are the people like me and my friends, at least in the human design world, or like the insiders of any field, right? There could be the insiders in film, and insiders they're the agents and the producers, and there's insiders in any area that you go into, the people that are really doing it. Any little niche has its insiders. And the outsiders always make up stories about them. And the stories aren't true because the outsiders are farther outside the fractal line, so they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just making up stories. And when you actually get to the little fractal cores, you go, oh, now I see, now I understand. When you get to the kitchen, if you were there at the kitchen and hanging out with David Byrne and all these people that kind of came out of the kitchen in the 70s and 80s, then you were there. And if you weren't, you just make up a bunch of stories about it. And then you can say, well, they weren't really that good. Oh, well, they were appropriating from this, and they were, you can make up any story you want. But, and I don't mean to say that all claims of appropriation are stories. That's kind of a bad example. But that's just one example of a sort of ressentiment type mentality that Nietzsche was really going against. I'm very Nietzschean still to this day, even though he was a 4/6. I can forgive him for that. But where he was kind of saying that there's so much resentment and hatred of the people that are actually doing things. He's like, don't be a hater. Like, if I had to summarize Nietzsche, it's like, don't be a hater. Just do it yourself. Do the cool thing yourself, and don't focus on the other people that are supposedly getting acclaim and shouldn't be, right? Because that's resentment. And that resentment of the other for living their life fully and loving their life fully and affirming their life fully is really the saddest thing. And this is very much a G-center learning here of the spirit and of how important it is to really say yes to, I'm a gate 29, say yes to life, affirm life, love life. And in this affirmation of life, you don't have time to be angry at or bitter or frustrated about the people that are supposedly getting acclaim that they're undeserving of. Any of that, that all goes away. So it's like that with Steve Rhodes too, and I do think he probably came around to that himself, because in his book he talks about how he'd imagined that he would be a famous rock musician or pop musician, and he wanted to be, really famous and all this stuff, and then he kind of had to learn who he really is and he's a double feeling person, and he's not about that for him. And although he does have some acclaim and he's worked with some very big names and so on, he's not a respect person, so that doesn't actually make him happy in his system. So it's kind of interesting to see where he is and all of that. But as far as the compatibility and the star ratings, the whole point is you love the people who are your fractal family. And love cannot be at the surface. It's what, not Nietzsche, but there's a great Zizek quote where he's talking about Lacan's theory of desire and saying how true love can never be for a positive quality. Because if you just love somebody because they have pretty eyes or a certain feature or a certain way they do something, some positive attribute that they have, then you're kind of loving them. You would love somebody else who had that attribute, right? To actually love somebody for who they are has to be what's within them beneath all the characteristics. And that's exactly what the fractal family is. It's exactly what the fractal family is. It's a subject position. It's not a subject. It's not a positive attribute. It's a position. It's a place. You're on a place with them in your geometry with them. And because you share that geometry together, you have love. And it's not because you have a love gate electromagnetic. And it's not because you have this or that in the chart, right? That being said, Steve Rhodes does give you and give everyone what they really want. Is the tee-hee-hee, do they like me or not? And he gives it to you through the nodes. And it's such an interesting move in that he says, oh yeah, nodes, environment, sure. The nodes are actually what you're striving to be more like and what you like in other people. So how's that for an interpretation? Not evolutionary astrology, karmic, and trajectories, and not human design, which is very similar to EA, similar to evolutionary astrology, where it's the south, the north node trajectory. And Steve Rhodes goes, no, this is just what you're drawn to. So it's funny because, Jenny and I are success, respect. Well, we can now look for anytime we see anybody that has nodes, success, respect, we go, oh, I got your number. You pretend, but you can't fool me, because That's what they're really drawn to and what they really like in others and what they go, oh yeah, this is the person that fits, that checks my boxes, And it's the same at color level and the same at line level. And now it's taken me a while to kind of, and I'm going along with it for the sake of this. I'm not saying I fully agree, but it's a really interesting part for me because I've had a lot of third and fourth lines in my life, and I've had a lot of problems with fifth lines. My nodes are third line on both sides. Now for Steve Rhodes, he doesn't consider them just third line. He considers that orienting me towards third and fourth line. So I am actually drawn to third and fourth lines. Well, that's a lot of people. A lot of people have third and fourth lines, right? But what I'm not drawn to is other 5-1s. Or that's what annoys me about them. Can't you be more like a third line? Can't you be more like a fourth line? I'm trying to sculpt people into being more third and fourth line-esque. And it's true, when I thought about it, I've already come to a lot of these conclusions in part from a totally other way. That's why it's so nice having Steve Rhodes here, because it's like I've been coming from this direction with Jenny. We're talking about this. We've been doing all this work here. Steve Rhodes is coming way out of left field, and he's coming from this other way. But then we're meeting in the middle, and we're like, wow, that actually is true. I thought so much about my third line bonds made and broken. I thought, well, the people in my life are, because I always think of nodes as the people in your life as well, because in human design partnership analysis, nodes are the people in your life. But I always thought, well, I'll have third and sixth line people because of the harmony, and that I have a hard time with 1, 2, 4, and 5. Well, according to Steve Rhodes, because third line is part of the binary with the fourth line, I am actually very comfortable with third and fourth line people. It's the 1, 2, the 5, and the 6 I have a hard time with, which is really just the 5-1s and the 6-2s, because the right angle has 3s and 4s in it. So I'm like a left angle designed for right angle people. Mm-hmm. How crazy is that? This level of deconstruction is not possible with conventional human design. This is why I do think Steve Rhodes has contributed a tremendous amount of original research that is really valuable and really cool. But you can see how different that is to be able to go, wow, I actually am okay with the 1-3s and the 1-4s and the 2-4s. As soon as we get to the 2-5s, I'm getting annoyed with them. Then we get to the 3-5s, I'm okay with them again. The 3-6, the 4-6, the 4-1 I'm totally fine with. Then we get to the 5-1, 5-2, 6-2, and I don't like them. And then the 6-3 I'm okay with again. Now I'm simplifying, but it's just kind of what an interesting level of analysis. According to Steve Rhodes, that even if I am okay with the other 5-1s or the 6-2s, I'm a little bit why do you have to be doing it that way? Why can't you be a little more third or fourth line in that sense? Opportunistic, he calls it. Which was another interesting thing. We call the fourth line the opportunist. For Steve Rhodes, the third and the fourth line are both opportunistic, which kind of makes sense. I mentioned that to James Alexander, and he said, well, it makes sense. The third line is bumping into things, takes an opportunity to make a bond, make or break the bond opportunistically. I thought that was a good point that James Alexander made. So anyway, those are kind of the two approaches. I think we've gone far and wide in our travels today, and maybe in future videos we'll go more into color and line and some of the nuances. Did you have any more questions for me, JV?
Nope.
Well, in that case, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to drink your water. Water is very good for you. I'm about to drink some myself as I'm quite parched. And till next time, thanks for watching.
All right, bye.